puts two children without a mother. There's zero likelihood for her to ever reoffend. I mean, zero in this one. It's not going to deter another person from getting involved, another correction officer from getting involved in a unique circumstance like this. And it's only going to bring further harm to the community and to her children that are involved here. This young man wants to be part of the child that she's the mother to. They're going to be connected whether she goes to prison or not the rest of their lives. And so are these families. So what purpose does it really serve? And I mean that from a very practical standpoint. I'm not saying this as a defense attorney. I'm saying this has been doing this job for 20 years and some 1,000+ cases by now at least. And I'm saying, hey, we got a person who had sex with someone who, but for the working in the institution, it would have been consensual, mutual, and legal. Now there's a child born, and we have a person that's not going to reoffend. She's certainly not going to get another job at a correctional facility, and she's highly unlikely to reoffend regardless, based off of not only the scoring in the PSI and the scoring in the psychological eval. So, frankly, if you gave her local services, put her in counseling and treatment and therapy, she could raise her own children in the community and not depend on other people to do that and those resources. And she can figure out how she's going to spend the rest of her life with this SORA registry and felony on her record. So that's a huge punishment. So I'm asking the court to do a downward departure. There's plenty of substantial compelling reasons to do so. She comes before the court with no criminal history. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, Ms. Palmer. Is there anything that you wanted to say today?
No.
All right, so I read through the report. I'm obviously familiar with what happened in this case and your actions. I've heard from the victim's mother, both here on the record today, as well as writing through her impact statement, which was consistent with what she stated here. I've listened carefully to what the lawyers had to say. And the court has a number of goals that it tries to achieve through sentencing. Number one is to punish the offender, in other words, to punish you for the wrongful conduct that you engaged in, to protect the community, to remove you from the community for a period of time, so that you don't have the ability to commit any offenses. Deterrence, so that other people see that this is the type of conduct that we don't condone or accept as a community or a society. And so hopefully people see that and don't engage in this kind of conduct because they understand there's consequences to it. And then finally, rehabilitation. So when I look at what is an appropriate sentence in this case, I try to balance all of those factors. There's a few things that stick out to me about this case in particular. And I understand the argument. Everybody's referenced it here today that this is a young man who was 16, at least at the time of at least one of these. Based on the prosecutor's statements, it's possible that something occurred when he was 15, but regardless, a teenage male. And everybody's alluded to the fact that he doesn't see himself as a victim in this case, but the law views him as a victim whether he thinks he's a victim or not. And the law views you as an offender, and that's because when you have a young person who's under the age of 18, and in this case, obviously a troubled young man who's had a lot of issues in his life aside from this, a young man that I think everyone would agree doesn't have the best judgment, and doesn't have the most maturity. It's your job as an adult, setting aside from the fact that you are charged with the responsibility of overseeing these individuals. If this was just something that happened out in the world, as an adult, as a grown woman, as someone who's supposed to have some maturity, certainly greater maturity than a 15 or 16-year-old boy does, it's your responsibility as an adult, even if that individual wants to engage in this conduct, to say, you know what, this isn't good for you, this isn't good for me, we're not going to do this, to exercise some better judgment. Certainly in your role at Shawano and the responsibility of oversight that you had even a greater responsibility to exercise better judgment. and not allow this individual to engage in conduct. And that's assuming that he was the mastermind behind this. When I read that report, it read much more to me like this is something the two of you came up with and executed together to be able to have access to each other. So I don't accept the premise that the young man is not a victim in this case. I don't accept the premise that you were led astray and that you had no ability to resist, and that he essentially convinced or forced you into this. I think you did this completely of your own accord for your own reasons to satisfy your own urges and desires, and that you did that without exercising any kind of good judgment or maturity to say no to this if you did want to do it. Setting all of that aside, you put that entire facility at risk. Every other person that works there was endangered by your conduct. Every other juvenile who was part of that was there for correctional reasons, to be helped, to be made better. You put all of those people at risk. And why? So that you could engage in sexual conduct and make yourself feel better for a little bit of time. That is conduct in and of itself. I think that warrants some serious punishment. You undermined the community and our society's ability to trust in people who are put in those kinds of positions of responsibility. To trust that when young people are sent to a facility like that, that they're going to be guided, that they're going to be looked after, that they're not going to be taken advantage of, and that the people who are charged with their care and their oversight aren't going to use that authority position to engage in their own sexual desires, which is exactly what they did. I can't imagine what was going through your mind that made you think that this was okay to do once, let alone multiple times, let alone allow yourself to become pregnant and have a child as part of this. I was unable to find any kind of logical thought process that would allow you to do that, especially given your position. So for all those reasons, I think it's necessary to impose a Department of Corrections sanction. I think it needs to be a sanction that sends to you a clear message that this is not conduct that is tolerated, to punish you for that wrongful conduct. Send a message to the community and other people working in those positions that sexual contact with juveniles that you're in charge of is not going to be tolerated or accepted. And hopefully through that sentence, rebuild some of the trust that was lost in those types of facilities and people that work there because of your actions. I do think there are some mitigating factors that Mr. Williams pointed out. You do have a lack of prior history. If you are a young person, you're 32 years old, you have an opportunity to correct your behavior going forward, and I hope that that's what happens. And I think the recommendation balances those aggravating factors that I've discussed as well as the mitigating factors. So if the court finds that a sentence within the guidelines, but towards the top end of the guidelines is appropriate, the court is going to sentence you to the Michigan Department of Corrections for a period of 48 months to 15 years. You do have credit for 1 day served. The court is going to require that you register under the Sex Offenders Registration Act and comply with all reporting requirements, that you not have verbal, written, electronic, or physical contact with the victim, either directly or through another person, and that you not be within 500 feet of that person's residence, school, or place of employment. The crime victim's assessment of $130, court costs of $325, DNA testing fee of $60, $68 state cost. You do have the ability to seek an appeal of the sentence. Mr. Williams, there is an acknowledgement of Ms. Palmer's appellate rights there.
Oh, okay.
If you can have her acknowledge receipt of those, Ms. Palmer, those papers are going to explain to you what your appellate rights are as well as how.
Time to break this one down. The final sentencing in this case brought everything into sharp relief, and Judge George Mertz did not pull any punches. After hearing impassioned arguments from both sides and a powerful victim impact statement from the youth's mother, The court settled on a sentence that balanced accountability with a tempered view of the defendant's future. Judge Mertz delivered his ruling with clarity and composure, walking through each legal principle with the care of someone who knows the weight of what he's about to do. He acknowledged the defense's request for leniency, citing lack of prior criminal history and the psychological evaluations suggesting low risk of reoffense. But he didn't let that overshadow the central issue. Ms. Palmer, as an adult and a corrections officer, held all the responsibility in the dynamic. She was not just another adult. She was in a position of authority, charged with the safety and rehabilitation of youth in a secured facility, and that role magnifies the harm done. Judge Mertz rejected the idea that the teen was the mastermind, or that Palmer was manipulated. His view was firm. She acted for her own desires and failed to exercise the judgment her position demanded. And he made it clear that even if the young man didn't see himself as a victim, the law does, and that's what matters in this courtroom. What followed was one of the more sobering breakdowns you'll hear in sentencing. Judge Mertz spoke directly to the impact Palmer's actions had not just on the teen involved, but on every staff member and resident at the Shawano Center. The breach of trust, the danger to institutional integrity, and the public's faith in systems meant, to help troubled youth, he laid it all out, one layer at a time. In the end, the judge sentenced Miss Palmer to 48 months to 15 years in the Michigan Department of Corrections, near the upper end of the guidelines. She also be required to register under the Sex Offenders Registration Act, with all the restrictions and obligations that come with it. While he did acknowledge mitigating factors, her age, lack of history, and potential for rehabilitation, Judge Mertz made clear this was a necessary sentence to reflect the seriousness of her actions. It was respectful, firm, and exactly the kind of judicial transparency you want when the facts are this difficult. If you found this hearing insightful, consider subscribing, hitting the bell, and letting me know your thoughts in the comments below. I read everyone.